Chessie018 was RuneScape's wealthiest player with over 150,000 US dollars worth of items before she got hacked and lost it all. But until now, everyone has had the story wrong. Jagex made a huge mistake, and there was nothing Chessie could have done to prevent herself from getting hacked. This is the untold story. Chessie's tale begins in August of 2005. She had just started the game and, like all new players, had virtually nothing. She needed a way to make money and figured out she could earn some by picking bananas. Placing 10 bananas in this crate on Karamja would earn her 30 coins every time. After picking enough bananas to feed Apatol for life, she had amassed a small little cash stack for her early game purchases. Well, on a trip through Varrock, she ran into one of her friends named Swame. This was before the Grand Exchange existed, and at the time, Varrock was one of the game's trading hubs. So Swame was there trying to sell 100,000 willow logs. Chessie asked Swame why he had so many, and he replied saying that he was a merchant. Essentially, he would buy the logs from other sellers at lower prices and attempt to resell them for higher. He encouraged Chessie to try it, as it had made him very wealthy. During this same trip through Varrock, she came across a player trying to sell a full set of party hats, some of the game's most valuable items. When Chessie asked to see the set, the player told her no. He said that she clearly didn't have the money for it. Chessie was offended and said that she would be richer than him one day. He responded with, Chessie got to work mining ore, smelting it into bars, smithing it into armor, and selling it to general stores. After a while, she had earned herself a nice little stack of 20,000 GP, and decided it was time to follow her friend Swame's advice. She began buying bulk amounts of lobsters at the lowest prices she could find, and selling them for higher prices. As her cash stack grew, she expanded into selling more items, making her even more money. Chessie made a name for herself in the merchanting community, and by 2007 had achieved 6 stacks of max cash and a small rare collection. But then the Grand Exchange released, a centralized marketplace that would make Chessie's money-making method dead overnight. Or so she thought. Chessie didn't know it yet, but this update would grow her wealth to absolutely unimaginable levels. Chessie quickly discovered that it was still possible to flip items for profit using the Grand Exchange. In fact, in some ways, it was easier than before. With access to so much wealth already, it wasn't hard to flip her way into even more wealth. She had more than she knew what to do with, so she did what any bored billionaire does. Tax fraud? What? No, buy a bigger house. She invested a ton of money into her player-owned house, and quickly rose the construction high scores, landing all the way at rank 1. But if being rank 1 wasn't cool enough, she spent about 500 million gold decking her house out with the most lavish furnishings and fun activities. Players would ask her, Chessie, how did you make so much money? And can you teach me? This request got so frequent that her friends urged her to open a merchanting clan. Essentially, a clan that would buy up a bunch of the same item at a low price, hold onto those items so the price and demand would increase, and then sell them off at the new higher price. Chessie liked this idea and opened a clan that she nicknamed Merch Masters. Chessie told players that it was a clan for everyone. Big or small, merchants could come to Merch Masters and get wealthy with her. The clan was a huge success and quickly grew to become one of the biggest merch clans in the game. Chessie was getting richer, her clan members were getting rich, and everyone was happy. But here's the thing about this story. I kinda don't believe it at all. All of what I just told you is Chessie's account of how she gained her wealth. After she became famous for her enormous bank, she started a YouTube channel to display her wealth and commemorate achievements. In 2009, she uploaded her video Tale of Success to tell her story. So what's my problem with it? Why don't I buy it? Well, I have 2 main problems. First is her story of how she earned her wealth before the Grand Exchange was launched. To recap, she made her money through merchanting, the main form of which is flipping, buying an item at a lower price point from another seller and attempting to sell it to someone else for higher. It's simple, but it works, even today. But it worked even better back in the early days of the game. If you were good, you could rack up an enormous amount of wealth very quickly. Even so, the amount of wealth she managed to amass was just insane. To go from absolutely nothing to 6 piles of max cash and a collection of rares in just a little over 2 years? It's something that even the best flippers in the game couldn't achieve. Now, I do want to preface that maybe it's possible she was just really good and did this all above board, but while researching, I came across a comment that made me a little suspicious. Allegedly, Chessie wasn't buying the items she flipped from other sellers. Instead, she was buying it from noobs. She would find a new player in a free-to-play world, teach them to mine or fish, and then buy whatever they collected for far less than the items were actually worth. This would allow her to achieve incredible profit margins, and the noobs wouldn't even realize they were being taken advantage of. Now, like I said, I can't prove if that's true for sure, but my second point, I absolutely can. So, like I said earlier, after the Grand Exchange released, Chessie created her merchanting clan, Merchmasters, which I described would buy up a ton of an item for cheap, hold on to it, wait for the price to go up since the item would then have a shortage, and then, once it reaches a higher price, they sell it all back. Seems easy, right? Everyone wins. Well, not really. Merchanting clans didn't actually work like that. In reality, they were just one big pump and dump scheme. The clan owner would pick an item that they wanted to pump, something that's not too rare but not too common. Let's use dragon plate legs as an example. So the owner would buy up a ton of dragon plate legs. Once they have enough, they would tell the ranked members of the clan to buy a ton too. These ranks would get early information because they would either be friends of the owner or they paid to get their rank. By now, the price would be rising. A little while after the ranks are told to buy the item, the rest of the clan would be told to buy it. The owner would change the clan's name to the item's name, as well as the price that everyone should sell at. Now, here's where things get really sketchy. The item would almost never reach that price target. It would start crashing before it ever reached it because the owners, ranks, and people who knew how these clans worked would sell early. This would leave everyone else now holding on to hundreds or thousands of an item that they most definitely overpaid for. Now, you'd think if that's the case, wouldn't Chessie and her clan be found out pretty quickly and labeled as scammers? Well, no, because Chessie had a die-hard fan base and an endless supply of kids who wanted to get rich quick. So her biggest fans and supporters were those ranked clan chat members that she made rich, but even the general public loved her. Earlier, I mentioned that Chessie was rank 1 construction, with a house worth over 500 million gold. Well, what's the point of having all that if you can't show it off? Soon after reaching rank 1, Chessie was hosting house parties every night. If getting to see the 500 million GP house wasn't cool enough, she would also frequently have drop parties with some of the game's most valuable items. Being the richest person in the game also gets you a lot of attention from the game's most famous players. Players like Nova Life, You Love Me, Defiled, and even a few Jagex moderators would make frequent appearances at her parties. Who wouldn't want to spend time at Chessie's? You'd get to explore the most decked out house in the game, mingle with the rich and famous, and maybe even pick up some game-changing wealth. Chessie's house would fit right in on MTV Cribs. Of course, these players would wonder, how does someone even get this rich? How can I get this rich? And the answer seemed to be Merchmasters. If we were dumb enough to fall for RuneScape goldgenerator.exe back then, we had no chance of dodging something this elaborate. Chessie now had the equivalent of an infinite money printing machine that wasn't just a virus, but it got to be so much it became boring. Chessie wanted to shift her YouTube channel's purpose from just flexing wealth and levels to more creative content. And I'll just say, it's very early 2000s. So this video is titled Chessie018 showing 500 Santas and real life pics. The video is essentially a RuneScape music video for a remix of Uptown Girl by Billy Joel. It starts off with a guy who wants to see Chessie's Santa hat collection, but for some reason she says no. A lot of Chessie in different in-game areas, some stock images, and paint creations later, the same guy shows up and asks again. I wish I could play it with the music too, but the guy goes, "Fine, since you won't show me, I'll turn into a monkey and eat you." And Chessie is like, "Oh no, okay, you can see my Santa collection. See, look at me wiggle it with my mouse." And without skipping a beat, the video turns into a slideshow of Chessie's real life pictures, of course, all synced up to the music. It is an absolute trip. Now, I'm not saying this to shit all over Chessie's content. I know I made videos just as weird, if not weirder, back in middle school, but watching the richest player in the game walk through the Grand Exchange typing the lyrics to Miley Cyrus's The Climb is just something I never expected to see. Well, not even content creation was enough to keep her interested in the game anymore. She had already accomplished everything she wanted and was by now easily the richest person in the game. To give you an idea of how much money Merchmasters made her, it's estimated that at her peak, she had 40% of the rares that were in circulation in the game. Although she didn't publicly quit the game, her logins became scarce enough that people started to notice. Unfortunately for Chessie, this also made her a prime target for hackers. This is where I should introduce Andy, also known as Sly. Andy had been recovering RuneScape accounts for about the last year or so, when Chessie started to lose interest in the game. Recovering is the process of pretending that you're the owner of an account and trying to trick Jagex into believing you. Recoverers like Andy would try to dig up as much information as they could on the owners of the accounts they wanted, and then hopefully have enough to be given access to the account. This is exactly what Andy wanted to do, along with the help of his friends James and Chainsaw35. After a few days of research, they felt they had enough information to recover the account. They sent in a request, and it was denied. A little while later, they tried again, with more information, denied. 3 more tries, and still nothing but denied requests. They submitted one more request, not expecting much, but to their surprise, the request was granted. They now had access to Chessie018's account, but not her massive fortune. Chessie was smart enough to have a bank pin on her account. Andy and friends could get through this bank pin by sending in a reset request, but it wouldn't be removed for 3 days. If Chessie logged in even once during those 3 days, she could cancel the request and secure her account. This was Andy's only shot. Luckily for him, 3 days passed and Chessie never logged in. Andy started streaming his screen to his friends, logged into Chessie's account, opened the bank, and his mind was blown. She had dozens of Halloween masks, party hats, and other rare items. But the real prize was her massive collection of 1,000 Santa hats. In total, the group was staring at over 170 billion GP worth of items. GP on the black market back then was worth anywhere from 60 to 90 cents per million, meaning on the high end, her fortune was worth a jaw-dropping $153,000. Andy began transferring all the items to his friends and was off the account in just a few minutes, but it wouldn't take long for players to find out what had happened. Somehow, someone in Chessie's clan chat knew Andy's RuneScape name and started spreading it and the news that he had hacked Chessie everywhere they could. If I had to guess, someone on Andy's team blabbed. Andy made a post to his clan's forum soon after the hack, admitting that he and his friends were behind it, but that he doesn't consider what he did to be hacking. He said, "Oh, I recovered the account. I didn't hack it. So yeah, guys, I'm not actually a hacker or anything, haha." Which technically he's right, but you still stole the account, buddy. He finished the post saying if he's invited to the clan's next drop party that Saturday, he'd be donating some of the wealth he had stolen.
I think he's definitely going to jail.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that he and his friends were pretty young. I think he genuinely thought what he did would have no consequences. In later interviews, he even said that if Jagex took him to court for all this, he'd win because he technically wasn't a hacker. But speaking of Jagex, how did they respond to this situation? Within just a few hours after the hack, Jagex locked Chessie's account and traced all the wealth they could. Every account that had touched her stolen items was locked and banned, with most of it being sealed away forever. But Andy claims that his friends got away with an undisclosed amount. Monmark H would go on to make a forum post about the hack without mentioning Chessie by name. He would refute Andy's points that Jagex couldn't prosecute him for this, because they already had to a different hacker in the past. He would end the post saying that Jagex does not return lost or stolen items, and that's why it's so important to keep your account protected. Until now, this was the full story, but I sat down with a Jagex moderator who was there when this all happened and got some more answers. So, remember that it took Andy 6 attempts to get into Chessie's account? You might be wondering, what was so special about that 6th attempt? In the interview Andy did after the hack, he said that the previous 5 requests were denied because he didn't have any of her previous passwords. And he was shocked when the 6th request was actually accepted. Well, according to the JMod I discussed this all with, there wasn't anything special about Andy's 6th recovery attempt. It was granted completely by accident. Jagex was a bit backed up in the support department at the time, so they had brought in someone from a temporary staffing agency to help out. On this temp's first day, Andy's recovery request came through his queue, and despite not having sufficient information, he granted it. When the JMod I discussed this with came into work the next day, he saw this temp being escorted out by security and learned what happened. Now, as for Jagex not returning any of Chessie's wealth, they had more reasons besides just their policy. This was the richest person in the game after all. You'd think they'd be willing to bend that policy a bit, especially when they were the ones who messed up. But they were worried that Chessie might think her account was no longer secure and just real-world trade everything she had been given back. Much like what happened when the items Mod Jed stole were returned to players. After all, Chessie is from the Philippines. In 2011, when the hack occurred, the average Filipino family was making roughly $5,300 US a year. Chessie had lost 28 times that amount. This is life-changing wealth. So why didn't she cash out earlier? If I had to guess, Chessie had such a huge love for this game and didn't want to risk getting banned, which I've gotta say is pretty admirable. But it's no wonder that after a blow that big, she never returned to RuneScape. However, you may still run into her name in-game, as someone else snagged it during 2017's inactive name release. As for Andy and those who helped him with the hack, they were never prosecuted by Jagex or anything like that, but it turns out he was friends with quite a few Jagex moderators at the time, and even ended up marrying one. Even though his identity was known, ultimately it was Jagex that messed up, so there was nothing they could do to him. But Jagex is no stranger to mistakes. Old School's first minigame introduced the most overpowered training method in the game's history, and Jagex couldn't fix it for years. Check that video out over on the right-hand side of the screen. Thanks for watching.